Yeah, it's basically telling a kid, I think what God would say to him is, look, like my child, you were not born into the wrong body. You were born into the wrong culture. Like a culture that's telling you need to hurt your body to be your authentic self. Your body doesn't need to be reconstructed. It's our culture that needs to be reconstructed. And what the body becomes is a false target of intervention. You have this angst, and it's like trauma trying to find an outlet. And it's like, it's hard to fight anxiety. It's hard to fight autism. It's hard to fight sexual abuse memories. It's hard to fight when your parents are getting divorced and everybody at school hates you. But if all of a sudden, this shadow boxing becomes an actual concrete thing, my body, that's the issue, my body. Now I can feel like I'm getting somewhere if I get puberty blockers, if I put a binder on. I feel like I'm actually taking control of something when my whole life feels out of control. It's much like an eating disorder. When your whole life feels out of control, if you can count those calories, you'll feel like you're somewhat in control of life. And so what's going on here is that we're actually collaborating with a mental illness instead of actually treating it.
Hello and welcome to another Parousia Podcast. I'm Charbel Raish, your host. And in our studios, Parousia in Sydney, Australia, we have a long-time friend now, founder of ChastityProject.com, none other than Jason Evert, the author of this book, Male, Female, Other, and it's the latest one in his range. And we've printed the whole range of the Chastity Project, and he joins me live in the studio. So excited. Jason, great to have you. Good to see you.
Always.
How have you been?
Can't complain.
Can't complain.
This is visit number 6 down under. So
wow.
Always happy to come back.
And you're closing in on Deacon Harold and Tim Staples.
Oh, really?
You've been here, I think it's 7 times.
Okay.
So you're one.
All
we
right.
need to get you here another time.
Yeah, let's get back here.
Make that 8. Look, we've been talking as well, of just chatting off air, and the need of this message, the need of what's out there. Students are hungry to hear the truth and in a loving way. And you one of the very few in the world that do this. I mean, I can imagine the demand is so high, but also the culture's changed a bit since if we're going to say BC, before COVID, but it feels like a lot has moved. I mean, so you release a book like Male, Female, Other.
Yeah.
I mean, probably 10 years ago, no need to do that.
Not even on the radar.
Tell us, what have you noticed in the shift in the struggles in teenagers now? Because that's your primary audience. Probably 13, 14-year-olds up to 18, 19.
Yeah, high school and college.
And then college as well, of course.
Yep.
What have you noticed, I guess, and I'm just curious because the world looked very different, 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's moved so fast and it's still moving in a rapid rate. What have you noticed, the major things there? Yeah,
I don't think it's a coincidence that this massive ascent of people identifying as trans happened after the whole COVID thing, because of the amount of time that people were spending in social isolation, just spending countless hours scrolling through social media. In fact, there's a researcher named Dr. Lisa Littman, not a Catholic, not a conservative. She worked for Planned Parenthood. She noticed this trend happening of adolescent girls who typically come from progressive families, often go to public schools, spending an inordinate amount of time on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and then coming out as trans, and then non-binary, and then their friend comes out as gender fluid, and this, that, pop. Before I know it, there's 6 or 7 girls all in the same school with these commonalities of spending massive amounts of time on social media because, they're struggling with their identity and a sense of connection, and then they find these gender labels that seem to kind of resonate with their lived experience of feeling like, I feel like I've never fit in with the women, and I feel like that I'm not quite one of them, and maybe that's what I am. And so they're kind of finding themselves in these new identities. But I remember one girl saying to me, who's wrestling with it, she's like, I just wish I lived on a farm 30 years ago because I wouldn't be wrestling with any of this stuff.
Wow, so that's clearly out there. And are you having to address this topic more in your presentations? Are you noticing that, and how has that been received?
Yeah, and so in the chastity talks, we keep it focused mainly on chastity rather than on the topic of gender. We've had to create an entirely different talk just on the subject of gender. And the requests that we're getting from parishes and universities and conferences of like, hey, because there's no priest right now in the church that went to seminary where they really discussed pastoral care for parishioners who identify as non-binary. It's like, wasn't even on the radar. And then now they're in charge of a Catholic elementary school. And like, wait a minute, we've got 3 kids in the elementary school that are identifying as trans, and they want us to use this pronoun. Like, what do we do? And the teacher goes to the principal, what's our policy? Well, we don't have a policy. Ask the priest. Father, what's our policy? I don't have a policy. Ask the diocese. And the diocese is like, well, they don't have a policy. And so everybody's kind of scrambling for answers. And so that's why I created the book, is to kind of provide clarity, but at the same time as charity, of really trying to set the pastoral tone for how do we approach this challenging subject of gender dysphoria without treating it like it's just simply some infernal ideology that we needed to debate and debunk and disprove. Like, well, yeah, there's that element of anthropology we have to look at, but these are also human beings that are really wrestling with gender dysphoria. And if they feel like all we have to give them is an argument, then it's like, okay, well, there's no room for me in the church to navigate the struggles that I'm having.
Wow, so well put. You do have a gift in sharing Christ's love, and I know in the past, because years ago I remember the whole gay marriage debate and addressing that, and people were struggling on how to communicate with that and how to deal with that. And I would say with a lot of the work, we're talking about what is love in relationships and dating, and you've written on this for years. Yeah. And sometimes a lot of people don't want to talk about this. And so I congratulate you for going there. It's a Catholic guide to understanding gender. Yeah. And I want to really stress the way you do it in as respectful as possible. It's in a loving way. And you got all these different chapters, gender theory claims. You cover quite a lot. There's a lot of research that's gone into this one. Yeah. Tell us about the process first. I mean, when the idea of just, I need to write this book, when did that sort of first idea come into your mind?
Well, the idea came because I'm looking for the book and it wasn't there. And there were good books out there, but it was just, for so many Catholics are just looking for like, okay, how do we respond to this stuff? Whether it's my daughter who is identifying as trans, what do I do? Or what if I experience gender dysphoria? What does God think about me? Just so many questions. Or college students sitting in a gender studies class and the professor's like, well, there's actually 5 different sexes and there's an intersex brain. And well, how do I respond to this? So I figured, okay, I've already done a lot of research and I've talked to lots of people wrestling with this personally. I'm going to read maybe another 15 books on the subject. I'll have a good handle on it. Then I'll write my own. So I finished the 15 books. I'm like, I'm not even close to where I need to be to write this book. I need to read 5 more in endocrinology, 5 more in pediatric medicine, 5 more in psychology, 5 more in anthropology, 5 more in feminism, 5 more on Marxism, 5 more on and by the time I was done, it was like 20-something thousand pages worth of literature that I had read. And I felt like, okay, now I'm in a space where I feel like I'm actually wrapping my mind around this a little better and I can speak into this. And most of the books I read were not from a Catholic perspective. I already had the Catholic anthropology understanding, but so I really read a lot of people who do not agree with the church teaches on this, so I could very much understand where they're coming from them and the wounds sometimes that they're speaking out of. Because the last thing I want to do is put out a book and they're like, that's not what I believe, that's not what we think, and like kind of straw manning and misrepresenting their positions. And so I wanted to make sure that I'm reading Judith Butler and I'm reading some of these, matriarchs of feminist thought and gender theory. And then if you look at the back of the book, there's more than 1,000 references in the endnote section that you can just go look at for peer-reviewed scientific journals on the brain research or disorders of sexual development. And so it's the type of book that you could give to a parent who has a kid struggling with it. Yes. You could give it to a person who's experiencing gender dysphoria. You could give it to a teacher, a student, a priest, or whoever. And so we obviously cover a lot of ground on it. But again, I really wanted to set the pastoral tone of this isn't just about winning a debate. This is about accompanying people who are wrestling with a very difficult subject that needs someone not just to talk to them, but to hear them and to listen to them. I had dinner last week with a gentleman who identifies as trans, and he and I have been corresponding for a long time via email, but I never met him in person. And I said, hey, I'm coming to your town. Like, do you want to do dinner and on me? And he's like, yeah. So he drove an hour and a half to come. And we just sat there and he talked probably 98% of the conversation. And I just listened, and I was just there for him. And I didn't go with a pre-existing agenda. Okay, by the end of the dinner, I got to convince him of X, Y, and Z. It's just like, okay, this is more of a marathon. This is not a sprint. I'm going to walk with this guy, and hopefully I'll have a friendship for years and see what blooms from it.
Perfect. I mean, that's what it's about. We really do ourselves no favors in trying to win, debates. you win a debate, you've won nothing really. Ultimately, it's a soul and it's a person in front of you. And we're all in this together as a global family.
Yeah.
You go through all the claims. Can I touch on some?
Yeah, pick whatever you like.
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
And so let's, I mean, the very first one, each person has their own gender identity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges is the word gender. It originally came from a Greek root in the word that meant the manner in which one generates. And that's, okay, well, that's pretty darn clear because there's only two manners in which we generate. I mean, you either have one of two gonads, either the testes or the ovaries, that's it. The gametes, sperm, egg, that's it. There's no third, there's no fourth, there's no intermediate. And so originally it was pretty clear. The first time we see the word gender appear in the English language, I believe it was about the 14th century, used in reference to grammar, that noun is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Some languages have up to 5 different genders. So it was a linguistic term. About a century later, it appears used as a synonym for biological sex. But it was predominantly throughout history just used for language. But then in the mid-1950s, we had a guy named Dr. John Money who coined the term gender roles. And here we start to see a departure between sex and gender. We start to see some space between those words for the first time. And the church would think that, okay, we can distinguish gender from sex, but we can't divorce it from sex. But to me, the problem with the word gender is it means so many different things to so many different people. And you could imagine having a conversation with someone who doesn't know what the word means with like a gender theory professor. And so I'd be like, okay, well, what's gender? And they would say, well, gender is your innate sense of your identity as male, female, both, or other. And then the other person's like, oh, so you're telling me, so when you do a gender reveal party, you're like revealing the innate sense of gender identity of an embryo? No. You're revealing the biological sex. Oh, okay, so gender, sex? No, gender's different than sex. What? You could just see how quickly you start, confused because it can have all these different meanings. And so to me, the word gender is particularly unhelpful. And so is it true that each of us has a different sense of what it means for me to be male or female and how I understand that? Yeah, it does. But what we've got to understand is that your body is not meaningless. Your body is meaningful. Your body isn't something you have like you have a pair of jeans. Your body is you. So if you say, I'm going to the store, well, Charbel's going to the store. Like your body is probably going to go to the store with Charbel if you're going to the store. And so we can't dislocate, in a sense, detach our identity from our bodies, because then your identity is going to have to attach somewhere, if not your body. But if it's not going to attach to your body, it's just going to attach to your personality. But there are as many personalities as there are persons, and you will literally end up with an endless spectrum of gender identities. And that's the confusion where we've landed today.
Wow. So, I mean, it is one of the very first things we read in the Bible, for example, male, female, they created it. And there is, and, we know in our generation, the generations before, the battle of the sexes, we've had the feminist movement's been out of a response, but that sort of, a lot of things changed now, because I remember talking about is there a gay gene? Remember that was a big thing about 10, 15 years ago.
Didn't find it.
And we didn't find it, but then even more evidence now with this transgender movement. Well, are you born this way or that way? And then so if we are changing more than once, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times, sometimes more, that opens up other cans of worms. And so we're not really settling in on what it is, who we are in our sexuality, but then as a human person, and we've got to get back to our identity.
And the world will tell the people that are wrestling with us, like, look, if you don't feel at home in your body, then your feelings are not the problem. Your body is the problem. And so because your body doesn't reveal reality, your feelings reveal reality. And so if you really want to be true to yourself, you just have to admit you're trans. And then if that's the diagnosis, then the only treatment is transition. Social transitioning, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgeries, then you'll feel at home in your own body. And you go down the whole road, and then within 10 years, their suicide rate climbs to 19 times higher than the general population. And it's not
studies of this, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a big claim.
Yeah, and that's the biggest study that was ever done, and it was in Sweden, which is a very progressive culture. So it's not like, oh, well, it's because you transphobic bigots, they're killing themselves. What it is that 90% of people who commit suicide have a diagnosable mental health disorder that's in need of clinical intervention. And you don't solve that with surgeries and hormones. And so if you isolate out the female to male transitioners, you're looking at a suicide rate more than 40 times higher than the general population. And so that's why if you look at what's going on in the Scandinavian countries, in Norway, Finland, Sweden, even Amsterdam, they're doing a U-turn on this. You can't get puberty blockers for minors over there anymore. You want to show up at a gender clinic in Amsterdam. Oh, my daughter's non-binary. She wants puberty blockers. They won't even give it to her for like 2 years. And from the kid's perspective, it's like, oh, by the time you give it to me, my puberty is going to be over. And from their perspective, it's like, exactly.
Yes,
because the writing's on the wall. I mean, Western Europe, they're doing an about face on this. Unfortunately, Spain, Canada, England, Australia. I mean, the writing's on the wall, but we've got like the pedal to the metal heading right towards this absolute dumpster fire.
Yeah. When you say minors, what age are we talking about when people are doing these operations?
Oakland, California Children's Hospital, 12 years old, double mastectomies for girls. Los Angeles Children's Hospital, 13 years old. Oregon, age of medical consent is now changed to 15, so girls can get double mastectomies without their parents' permission throughout the entire state of Oregon. But you can't use a tanning bed till you're 18 or get a tattoo till you're 21.
The double standards right there.
Yeah, and who's going to turn the tide is going to be the detransitioners.
Yeah.
The tens of thousands of people right now that are starting up lawsuits and petitions and websites and activist groups to hit the brakes on this thing. Because they're like, look, we did it, and you told us the research was there, and then we got the side effects, then we looked into the research and realized the research hasn't even been done yet. Like, you're giving me puberty blockers telling this is fully reversible, when in reality, 99% of the time when you put a kid on puberty blockers, they just go on to cross-sex hormones. So you don't even know what happens for people who go off the puberty blockers, telling us it's reversible. Where's the data? There is none, because they haven't done any studies on it. They're telling the kids, oh, totally safe. But the kids, girls who go on puberty blockers become more likely to self-harm afterwards. If you go puberty blockers to cross-sex hormones, it sterilizes you for the rest of your life. You go on the cross-sex hormones as a girl, the testosterone, your risk of heart disease quadruples. You'll have to have your uterus removed within 5 years because the increased risk of endometrial cancer. I mean, the osteoporosis of these kids, because the puberty blockers halt bone development. So you've got like 15-year-old kids in the trans community who have the bones of like a 70-year-old woman in their body. And like, I never broke a bone before. Then I started taking this and I broke 3 toes. I broke my wrist. I broke 4 fingers, you know, and it's like their bones are brittle. And the problem is like, well, they're not losing bone strength. No, they're not losing bone strength. The problem is they're not getting bone strength. And if you miss that critical window of bone development at adolescent, you can't recoup that time. You miss the window, it's gone. And so where are these kids going to be when they're 75 years old?
Yeah. Wow. So do you have that? I mean, that's all in the book?
Everything
covered.
Yeah.
And these people who are detransitioning, I mean, that's fascinating. Tens of thousands out there coming out in the public.
Yeah. You look at, if you just go on a website like reddit.com and just get in there and type hashtag detrans, the forum there is more than 50,000 people on there alone. And they're screaming from the rooftops, like, get the kids off the drugs, like, this is child abuse. And, like, these aren't people who are, like, right-wing conservative activists. Like, these are people, some of whom still identify, you know, in this area and experience gender dysphoria, saying, look, this is not the answer. Quit treating the kids like guinea pigs. You know, what's interesting is the biggest gender clinic in the United Kingdom is called Tavistock, and it just got shut down this last spring. And what had happened is 35 of their psychologists quit. They said, we're not being allowed to explore the deeper psychological issues. They only did one audit ever of the young people. And what they found is 125 kids coming in for gender transitioning. And they found that 98% of them had comorbidities of mental health disorders. But they had no staffing to deal with mental health issues. So they just diagnosed them as trans and just pushed them through the pipeline.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we got to pray for our the medicals.
Yeah, but it was just shut down, and now they've fractured it into smaller mental health clinics.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, 18 chapters you go in this book, quite a lot. You do this one here. Trans people should be free to compete in sports, use restrooms, and enter public spaces that align with their gender identity. These are the topic. This is one of
these are the claims.
The claims.
Yeah.
I mean, more and more people are realizing female sports are starting to realize, hang on, there is a disadvantage here.
Oh yeah, rugby. I mean, well, I mean, you just look at like in America, USA Powerlifting just lost a lawsuit that they now have to allow people who identify as female, even though they're biological males, to compete in women's powerlifting sports. And what that means is if I were to identify as female, I would actually have the world record for deadlifting. in my age and weight class of any woman who's ever lived. I'd have the world record. I mean, that's how nonsensical it is. Yeah. And these women are they're losing scholarships, they're suffering injuries, get their teeth knocked out. And it's like, who's going to, because you got to ask yourself, okay, who's going to stand up for women's rights within the trans community? The men who want to be one or the women who don't? The answer is neither. And so as a result, it's a form of misogyny of just like, no, my desire to appropriate womanhood is more important than your safety in this sport and your scholarship and everything else. But in the States, people are starting to stand up against this. There was a women's swim team where a guy was allowed to get on the team identifying as a woman. And the girl's like, okay, well, then you're the team. We're out of here. You can have your women's swimming team. It's just going to be a guy who says he's female. Now, we've got to have nuance here, though. And what I mean is, when it comes to issues of, like, let's say, domestic violence shelters, what's happening is men are showing up at these clinics or at these domestic violence shelters, identifying as a woman, being allowed in because they can't discriminate based on gender identity. Then a woman comes in, who's been domestically assaulted, goes into the shower area, and there's a guy in there. Then they go to the manager, there's a guy in the shower. And the manager says, well, that's actually a trans woman, and we can't discriminate based on gender identity, so you can either tolerate that person's presence or sleep outside yourself tonight. I'm like, okay, well, what about this woman? She just got domestically assaulted by a live-in boyfriend. She doesn't want to really share a shower with a guy who says that he's a woman. Fair enough. Okay, but then where does the guy sleep who identifies as a woman? Do we put him in the men's domestic violence shelter presenting as a woman where he's likely to get assaulted by the guys? Okay, then where does he sleep? Behind a dumpster in an alley somewhere? How do we care for him? And so you can see the complexity of these issues. Okay, this is a person who needs a safe place to spend the night, who probably doesn't feel safe, within. Or you look what's going on in the prisons. Almost every state in America has men who identify as women being allowed into the women's prisons. Pregnancies, rapes, sexual assault, childbirth. Like, what do you do with the baby born to an inmate who was impregnated through a sexual assault from another male inmate who thought he was a female? It's like, okay, well, but what if you put that guy in the men's prison where he belongs? He's going to get, assaulted over there. So we need to dedicate special units, perhaps, within correctional facilities for people who identify as trans who aren't going to be safe in these other facilities. And so we've got to be able to make sure that we have enough sensitivity to these issues of saying, you're out here, you're over there, and being like, okay, this person needs care, and we're not going to just throw them to the gutter. And maybe it needs some accommodations and some bending a little bit, but we need to care about this person as a human being and their safety as well, because if we don't, no wonder why they might be more likely to take their life, because nobody's actually looking out for them.
So true. A lot of this is really, sometimes a response to some tragic abuse and all this sort of stuff. And this is a real core problem. That the elephant in the room is the mistreatment of either minors, mistreatment of each other, men, through violence, through sexual abuse as well. Mm-hmm. And we've had just it's gone far too long. And how do we? This is it, and this is sort of we're seeing. We're in a place now where we don't even know where to turn, how to talk about things, how to bring up a conversation, and we just sort of put our head in the sand and just whatever. Yeah. We need to really speak about this, and if we love people, we've got to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking because you look at the murder rate, the suicide rate of people in the trans community. Part of it is they have a very difficult finding gainful employment. And so many of them turn to sex work in order to make ends meet. And a lot of homicides happen within that line of work because it's intrinsically dangerous. And obviously suicide leading out of that type of lifestyle as well. And so I think it's so important that we as Catholics approach this issue with ears and eyes, not just a mouth to debate and win some debate. And that's what we're doing right now. We're just trying to win a bunch of debates. And there's a time and place for that, and I understand the importance of it, but eyes and ears, I know a guy who does evangelization in gay and lesbian bars in Chicago. When he told me that, I'm like, wow, you're probably a pretty popular guy. I'm bringing your catechism into a lesbian bar. And he's like, no, we just talk about, the Bears and the White Sox. And I'm like, well, how do you talk about God? And he said, usually we don't. And I said, well, how's that evangelization? He said, look, I've been doing this for 3 years. And he said, I have male prostitutes calling my cell phone at 3:00 in the morning when they're going to commit suicide because they know I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm a really good listener. He said, you don't always have to be the mouth of Christ. Sometimes you just have to be his ears. And so that's the idea. Like, we got to be just not the mouth and like winning debates. Ears, I need to listen to this person's story and be there for them. But even the eyes of Christ. I met a mom recently, and her adult Catholic son is now transitioning. And the mother's just heartbroken. She's probably 55, 60 years old or whatever, and she's devastated. And she's told the boy, the man, like, don't even come to my house in your wig and your mascara and your fingernails. I wouldn't even look at you if you come into my house. And I challenged her on it. I'm like, I said, I can understand it's hard to look at your son because it's very different than the way that you thought he'd ever look. Mm. But I said, you know what? She was Filipino, and so I used some Tagalog. I said, Mama Mary. I said, Mama Mary did not want to look at her son when they took him down off the cross and they placed him in her arms. But she didn't take her gaze off of him. And I said, your son needs your maternal gaze of love now more than he's ever needed it in his life. And your look of love is not a look of approval, an affirmation that just because I'm looking at you with love, I'm approving any decision you make, but he's waiting for your gaze. And she just broke down. And I said, look, Our Lady's heart was pierced and yours is going to be as well. Yeah. But don't take your gaze off your son. And so we've got to be the eyes of Christ, the ears of Christ, the mouth of Christ, the whole approach. And I think that's the pastoral tone that we need to set leading into this. Because I've talked to enough people that are like, yep, all you Catholics do is just hate and argue on social media. It's like, no, we got to do better than that.
Yeah, praise God. God bless you. Keep going. That's so true. And the message of the gospel is so powerful, and it can pierce through if we actually live it and do that. Yeah. A couple more. You've got here, parents and educators ought to affirm any child who identifies as trans. Mm-hmm. What's this chapter at? Chapter 17. Yeah. It's a big deal now. Schools are definitely not going there. Teachers have their hands tied. What are your response? I mean, it's happening as young as kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So we're hearing this happening. Oh yeah. Right now, in some states in Australia, it's becoming illegal to even consider the possibility that they could be wrong. Yeah. So please.
And it's interesting how they've hijacked the English language of saying, well, if you're trying to help a young person to feel at home in your own body, you're doing conversion therapy. Mm. But then if you're giving them cross-sex hormones and cutting their breasts off, you're giving them affirmative care. It's like, well, wait a minute. You're affirming their gender by cutting their breasts off, but converting them by helping them to feel at home in their own body. Ryan Anderson is a great Catholic thinker, said it's an Orwellian misuse of language. Yes. And so, the social transitioning is actually correlated with chemical transitioning, meaning if you have adults going along with this and be like, oh yeah, you want to change your name, your preferred pronouns, your restroom, your clothing. Yeah, we'll go along with this whole thing. That's actually associated with higher rates of transitioning because in effect, the kid is looking for this social affirmation of, okay, you guys think I'm on the right track? Okay, then let's keep going through this. And it gets harder to detransition the deeper you get into it. It's like, I've already fought for this, that I am trans and I am this, and I want you to use my name, I want you to use my pronouns, I want my puberty blockers, I want my cross-sex hormones, I want my breasts cut off. And then it's like, wait a minute, how do I go back now that I've already demanded all of these things once I realize this might not be the right option for me? There was a girl named Kiara Bell over in England. She got puberty blockers at 16, affirmative care, cross-sex hormones at 18, affirmative care, double mastectomy in her early 20s, affirmative care. And then later in her early 20s, she realized, wait a minute, like, what did I do to my body? Mm. And then she looks up, like, what did you adults let me do to my body? And she sued the biggest gender clinic in the UK, the Tavistock, and she won. It took it up all the way to the High Court in England, and they ruled that, indeed, you cannot have informed consent for these procedures at the age of 16 or 18 years of age. And so parents need to get their head out of the sand and just look at what the detransitioners are saying. Look at why the Western European countries have done an about face on this issue. I mean, Sweden is not denying minors puberty blockers because they're such a progressive, conservative culture. It's because the data is clear. We're harming these kids with this treatment, not helping them.
Wow, so true. Powerful. Yeah. What I want to say, I mean, we mentioned before, I mean, the idea of abuse, and a lot of this can come out of abuse, but where actually the solution isn't to give further abuse. Yeah, and that's what we're doing, and basically.
Yeah, it's basically telling a kid, I think what God would say to him is, look, like my child, you were not born into the wrong body. You were born into the wrong culture. like a culture that's telling you need to hurt your body to be your authentic self. Your body doesn't need to be reconstructed. It's our culture that needs to be reconstructed. And what the body becomes is a false target of intervention. You have this angst, and it's like trauma trying to find an outlet. And it's like, it's hard to fight anxiety. It's hard to fight autism. It's hard to fight sexual abuse memories. It's hard to fight when your parents are getting divorced and everybody at school hates you. But if all of a sudden this shadow boxing becomes an actual concrete thing, my body, that's the issue. My body. Now I can feel like I'm getting somewhere if I get puberty blockers, if I put a binder on. I feel like I'm actually taking control of something when my whole life feels out of control. It's much like an eating disorder. When your whole life feels out of control, if you can count those calories, you'll feel like you're somewhat in control of life. And so what's going on here is that we're actually collaborating with a mental illness instead of actually treating it.
Yeah, so true. So true. The last chapter here, if you struggle with gender dysphoria, you should accept that God made you trans. This is another claim.
Yeah.
What do you guys, I mean, and this is going to open up to, I guess, God's plan and why is this happening and how is God allowing it and all of this.
Yeah.
But just touch on the chapter first and then I'd like to unpack it.
Yeah, in terms of like, well, this just means that you're trans. Like you have this attraction, you have this feeling, you have this inclination. That's who you are. This is a real big, the identity piece is major because young people are searching for identity and community and a sense of mission. And if they're not finding that in the church or at home, then all of a sudden they find, especially online on Instagram, these influencers saying, hey, I identify as non-binary. And then the kid's like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I feel like that guy or that girl kind of feels. Like I feel like the outlier. I feel like I've never quite been at home in my own body. And I always hated my breasts anyway. And it's like, wow, you start to, and then you find this word that seems to resonate with your lived experience. And then you latch onto it. And what's interesting is 42% of people in the trans community actually meet the criterion for an autism diagnosis. And one of the hallmarks of autism is, very black and white, rigid thinking patterns and obsessive amounts of interest in a particular topic. And once you latch onto that topic, it becomes the thing that you're obsessed with. And so if your transition becomes that thing, they latch onto this and they find their identity in it, but then they find their community. I've got this Spectrum Alliance and I've got this LGBT club. So all of a sudden I found this affirmation in this group when I felt like the odd man out my entire life. I finally feel like I found my family, my posse. And then all of a sudden they also find their mission. We're this victimized minority and we need to stand up for our rights. And so these core human issues of identity and community and mission all get met at once in the trans label. And that's why if you kind of poke at it a little bit or try to pull the thread out, you get this anaphylactic reaction of like, this is violence against me. It's like, I'm not being violent. I'm just asking you some questions about this. It's because you're tapping into these core issues. And so for a person who experiences these things, what they need to understand is that we understand that this language may resonate with your lived experience, but your identity isn't trans. Your identity is you're a beloved child of God. That's who you are. We can't add the word trans to another word and create a new reality. That's not how the world works. I can't call myself transracial or trans age or transgender. Like the human being can't actually change sexes. And they might say, yeah, no, I'm not saying I'm changing my DNA. What I'm saying is I just want to look how I feel. And so I think it's important that we listen to them, but to help them to understand, let's not exchange a story for a label.
Yeah.
I want to hear the story.
So true.
Because one girl came to me and she said, yeah, I told my mom I was non-binary and she freaked out on me. And I'm like, okay, tell me what you told your mom. And she's like, well, I told her I was non-binary and my pronouns were they, them. And I said, okay, we're going to do this again. I'm going to be your mom. You're going to be you. And I want you to explain to me non-binary, but you're not allowed to say the word non-binary. Now go. And she said, okay, well, I feel like I don't want to have to do everything the girls do. And I want to be interested in some of the things that the guys are allowed to be interested in. I don't feel like I've ever really perfectly fit in with all these other girls. I'm like, yes. I'm like, your mom would track with all of that. But as soon as you pull out this neologism of this word non-binary, the whole conversation's stopping there because your mom's just going to, no, you're not, you're a girl. And it's like, okay, let's just put the label down just for a minute and tell me the story behind it. And I think that we'd make a lot more understanding of them and it would help them to understand themselves. And so the word that I try to give is listen to gender dysphoria with reverent curiosity. And what I mean by that is not just obey wherever it leads you, but there's a story there. There's often unmet emotional needs. There's sometimes trauma. Let's listen to why the dysphoric feeling is emerging, and sometimes it can be a roadmap to that person's healing.
Wow, so good. Wanted to look at this from the idea of love and wanting that we're destined. We're made for love. We're made by love. We're made for love. And so now the distinction here, the idea of our identity as a child of God, who is love. And many of us, if you're not called to a religious life, then you want to be married, but then there are some people who just need to figure this out first. What sort of, tips? We've said a lot, but read the book, pray. But just struggling, not if you are one watching this, listening to this, and you are confused about, are you a male or female? Do you think you're something else or feel like you're something else? What advice would you give that person right now to begin? What's the first step?
Well, one is to know that God gets you. Even when you don't feel accepted by others, not even accepted by yourself, when you feel a mystery even to yourself, He's the only one that really gets you. Even people online in the trans community and support groups, even they weren't there for you in the middle of the night when those tears were kind of landing on your pillow and you just felt like more alone than ever. God was actually with you in that moment, and then there's an Old Testament passage that talks about how He stores all of our tears in a vial. I was actually over in the Holy Land, and you can actually get from some archaeological sites these vials that were actually little vases that women would collect their tears in and would actually keep them. And so when it talks about the woman bathing Christ with her tears, it's because they actually stored them, and she would have poured out her tears onto the feet of Christ. But the Old Testament said that God stores them all in the vial, that He's actually collecting them when you're not there doing it. And so to have that idea of that compassionate God who sees you in that moment and know that you're not a walking abomination to God because you're wrestling with your gender identity. This is a huge piece. They think that they're constantly just in the displeasure of God because they're wrestling with this, as if it's something that they chose. I'm just going to do this to defy God. No, it's like, no, I just want to survive. I just want to feel at home in my own body and just know that He gets you and that He's willing to walk with you, that church loves you, and that we ask their forgiveness for the times that we've failed to treat them with love and respect and kindness. And so we need to maybe do some apologies. And I think that would do a lot to improving the relationship because there are people in the Catholic Church, perhaps sitting right next to you in the pew on Sundays, who wrestle seriously with gender dysphoria. But they're just trying to pull it together on Sunday to fit the norm, of what they're supposed to look like. But behind closed doors, they're really wrestling. And if they hear you making fun of that tranny and this and that, well, heck, why would they even want to come to the church? And so we've got to understand that we need to make a home for these individuals and walk with them and know that God loves them. And it's not a sin to experience gender dysphoria. And so God gets you. Even when you don't get yourself, He's the one who always will.
Praise God. Do you cover this on the website, Chastity? Do you have articles? I know you got it on all the dating topic, but on this topic, are there resources online?
If you go to chastity.com/gender, we have one page that houses all of different interviews, peer-reviewed scientific journals, a link to get the book, interviews like Jordan Peterson with Chloe Cole, who's a detransitioner. Wow. So legal advocacy groups that parents can work with to defend their rights, because a lot of times they'll have a divorce going on, a custody battle. Dad wants to let the kid transition, mom does not. Really difficult issues. Or even in some countries where they want to take away your parental rights because you're not affirming the gender identity of the kid. And I've seen some heartbreaking stories of parents that lost custody of their kid, and the kid got involved in all the stuff, and the parent is just begging the state, look, my child needs mental health services, not puberty blockers. And, the kid commits suicide, and it's like he never got the intervention that the child needed. And so it's heartbreaking stuff. And so at chastity.com/gender, you'll find a lot of these resources and links.
Wow. Awesome. So I want to just sort of touch on maybe a quick highlight. I've pulled this out to you talk about the dating blueprint. This is a big part of the ministry and what to do there. Before I want to dive into this book, but this very quickly, this book about dating, because it's been a big part of your career. You spent many years talking about this. What would people expect when they read this?
Well, we came out with a book for the girls, How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul.
Yes.
And the guys are like, well, where's the book for guys? And I'm like, well, guys don't read. And they're like, no, like, we're literate. We want a book. And I'm like, okay. So I thought, what are the guys actually going to read? And then it just dawned on me. I'm like, that's what it is. I've always felt bad for the guys because all they get told at the relationships is what they can't do. Like, don't do this and don't do that and don't do that. And I'm like, all right. Then they get to college and it's like, okay, I can't sleep with my girlfriend. I can't look at pornography with my girlfriend. I can't live with my girlfriend. Can't have an abortion with my girlfriend. Like, okay, I know everything I can't do with a woman, but what am I supposed to do with one? Oh, we don't teach that. Good luck in college, bye. Yeah. And it's like, well, that's what we need. It's like a book on just dating etiquette to actually give these guys the specifics of like, okay, how do I know this is the right girl to date? Is it the right time to date? If so, how do I ask her out? What are dating etiquette tips of just like, where do I go on a first date? And like, just because guys just want specifics. And I think if you give them the specifics, and I started writing the book and then I quit because I'm like, well, guys don't care what I think about dating. Guys want to know what the girls think about dating, but girls don't want to tell the guy what they want the guy to know because they want it to come from him and not from her. And I'm like, how do you get around it? So I got on our social media. I'm like, okay, we got 100,000 women following us on social media who are single. So I said, ladies, just tell me what you wish we knew, and I'll put it in the book for the guys. Just like, how do you want to be asked out? How do you not want to be asked out? Where do you want to go on a first date? Just give me the specifics, spill the beans, and I'll let the guys know.
I remember
and the
that.
floodgates opened, and they submitted more than 30,000 words of feedback, but it was gold. And so we put what the women said in that book of just the specifics of like, don't ask me out over a text message. It's got to be face-to-face. Use the word date. Have clarity. Don't just ghost me if you want to break up. Just the specifics. I
got to list them just straight through for what people can expect. I love it. Love your bride before you meet her. Mm-hmm. Is she the one? Ask her out. That's a basic thing, right? Ask her out. Mm-hmm. It's not happening these days. Date your soulmate and then prepare a place for her and then cleave to her. Yeah. 6 chapters, nice and small. Yeah. But it's a good size, book. So fantastic. Yeah. I'm glad you did that. Yeah, no, the guys are happy too. They told me it worked. I got a girlfriend, Wow. And now I know actually what to do with her in the meantime. And so that's the end game of the ministry is kind of create little holy families. Yeah. But you can't get there if no one's asking anybody out. Wow. Well, keep going. I mean, 26 years now you've been doing this. Is that right? Yeah. Praise God. And it's a message that needs to be taught. You've covered so much, and I encourage everyone to look at the range we've got on our website, parousiamedia.com, Chastity Project. And all of that. You've got a website, chastity.com. Mm-hmm. Is the org one there as well? .org is our secular or public school website. So all chastity stuff, but no religious content. I want to promote that too. Yeah. If we can, chastity.org. We'll put them both in the link because we do have non-Catholics watching the show, and I'd like to have something for them to point to. And it's the same messaging. It's powerful. Mm-hmm. And of course, these great starters as well. I just wanted to highlight, pure manhood, pure womanhood, pure love. I've had lots of non-Catholics want these, and you've had them. You've created secular versions for these as well, which we do also have in the public schools. Yep, secular and Spanish, and then the Catholic English. Spanish, fantastic. Yeah. Your wife also wrote a book, Made New. Yep. Yeah. What does she do? Well, it's because the whole Me Too movement came out years ago. Yes. Hashtag Me Too, but there's like no follow up to it. It's just like a hashtag. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, that we need some follow up. So she kind of shared in this book how she was sexually abused by somebody in her own family, and talks about how to kind of face it and heal it instead of absorbing the shame and the blame that doesn't belong to you in the first place. Wow. So she kind of walks you through all these lies you start to believe when these wounds aren't getting healed of just like, I'm unlovable, or I'm not worth protecting, or it was my fault, or I don't need to go to counseling, or I don't need help. Just all these things you have to one by one go through, because a lot of times if you suffer a trauma and it's not healed, kind of lies start to grow out of that. You're not worth loving and your body's not a big deal, all this stuff. And then from these lies sprout bad fruit of promiscuity or body image issues, all this stuff. And that gets all the attention. But if you really get down to the root system, that's what needs to get healed. Because otherwise you can just clip off the fruits, but they're going to be back in a couple of weeks. Yeah. And so we got to get down to that root system that's sprouting these lies. And so that's what she tries to do in the book. Wow. Fantastic. It's a beautiful story how you met your wife and proposed, and we've do that. Can we, just as we come to a close, one of the final area, I want to come back just to the core of, of relationships and of the cell society is the family. Yep. The unit. And the concept, how right in the beginning, what is it? Male, female, children. Mm. But let's face it, 1 in 2 marriages are ending in divorce. Mm. Those who are surviving would probably admit it's not been the most greatest of relationships. Some are just putting up with it because we're not seeing marriages thriving. There's we're not seeing enough examples of what a healthy marriage looks like. What would you say now to those who are in a relationship, a married relationship, those who have a family and children, those whether they're newlyweds or been married decades and decades and decades, and those engaged to be married? We need healthy marriages. How can we achieve that? What's the secret? Because I think with the healthy marriage, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if we have healthy marriages, we will have healthy families. If we have healthy families, we will have healthy children, and I'm talking the whole being, the society will benefit. But we've really have ripped apart what that looks like.
Well, if you want to have a healthy marriage, you need healthy people to get married, which means deal with your stuff before you get married. Instead of thinking your marriage is going to be some kind of a car wash, and you put on your wedding ring and all your porn addiction goes away, and you put on your bridal veil and all the, trauma or mental health issues that you never dealt with are just going to disappear with that. And so we've got a lot of people going to marriage prep class, and that's not marriage prep. That's like triage. Like that there is some serious stuff that should have gotten dealt with a long time ago. Emily Wilson is a woman I know who does a lot of work with engaged couples, and she said what's been fascinating is she's never met an engaged couple ever who regretted breaking off their engagement. But the number of people who regret not having broken off their engagement is staggering.
Wow.
And so a lot of times there's red flags and they're not getting dealt with before marriage. And then you're wondering why your marriage is a dumpster fire. And it's like, well, you should have invested 5 years of your single life to mental health services and counseling and trauma recovery and all these things and sex addiction therapy or whatever it is you needed to deal with. You didn't deal with. And now it's going to get a lot harder in marriage because you've got so much other stuff going on and stresses and, triggers and things like that, some of the stuff could be so severe that they could actually threaten the validity of the marriage itself if you don't deal with this stuff. Other stuff will be like, no, it's a valid marriage, but it's going to be a tough road ahead, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of stuff and baggage that probably should have gotten unloaded before the wedding day. And so it's never too late to deal with the stuff. I mean, couples need to go to counseling and things like that, but sometimes it can end in some very difficult divorces and even annulments where it was like, wow, this person didn't even have the psychological capacity to enter into what was a spousal bond. They were not able to assume the essential obligations of a marriage because psychologically they were just not there. And so, or there was stuff there hiding and lying. And so we need these solid marriages and it's obviously easier said than done, but get to counseling, find a good Catholic marriage therapist because the family's under attack because it's the weapon. That's why it's under attack. It's like the Top Gun movie that came out last summer. The whole theme of the movie was like, kill the enemy's weapon. That's the whole thing. The whole plot was we got to bomb that thing. Why do they want to bomb that thing? Because that was the weapon. So to me, the family is the weapon that God wants. And so the devil's going to point all of his guns at that because if families can just be what they're called to be, the devil's got no chance.
Wow.
And so that's the thing. G.K. Chesterton called the family a cell of resistance to oppression.
Right, absolutely. Amen. You talk about that as well, right? In some of your work. Praise God. Keep going. Well, I want to thank you. Thank you. I wish I could keep going for hours. I mean, there's so much to cover, but and this is the thing. We just start one thing at a time where we're at, and I would like to congratulate you on the book.
Thank you.
And I encourage people to get this book. So male, female, other. Let's go through this. Let's learn the facts. Let's learn how to respond. And your website again, chastity.com. That's it. Very simple.
That's it.
And those who are non-Catholic, you recommend chastity.org.
Well, yeah, come to both of them.
Yeah.
Chastity.org has no religious content. Chastity.com is much more robust, but has the faith-based content.
Brilliant. Thank you. And let's keep going. We're here right behind you at Parousia and want to keep supporting you, praying for you. Pray for us. And
we'll do.
Thanks for coming to Australia.
Keep up the great work.
Back.
Thank you.
God bless you. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I hope you learned a lot in that episode. It was only a short one. I really wish we can keep going, but get the books. Go to chastity.com or .org, and at parousiamedia.com, we've got the resources. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, at Parousia Media YouTube channel. Click the bell, and please share these videos around among your friends. We're giving more and more content away on YouTube, and of course, all of the popular podcast platforms again. Thanks, everyone. Please pray for this man. He's doing important work, his family, and pray for all those young people, the teenagers and college-age students who are listening and hearing the message. May it impact them in a positive way. May God continue to work through him. Pray for him. Pray for the Chastity Project. Pray for us at Parousia. Until next time, God bless.